I never thought the happiest day of my life would turn into my worst nightmare. There I was, celebrating the $40 million sale of my tech company with my only daughter Stephanie and her husband Paul at La Maison, the most exclusive restaurant in Boston. When I excused myself to take a call from my attorney, a waiter gently touched my elbow. "Sir, I hate to tell you this," he whispered, "but I just saw your daughter pour something into your champagne glass." My blood ran cold as I thanked him, then calmly returned to our table and switched our glasses during a toast. 10 minutes later, I watched as my own daughter began to sway in her seat. I built Digital Fortress from nothing but an idea and pure determination. 35 years ago, I was just a small-town programmer with big dreams and a tiny apartment that doubled as my office. Back then, cybersecurity was barely on anyone's radar, but I saw the coming digital revolution and the vulnerabilities that would inevitably follow. My first client was a local bank that had experienced a primitive hack. After I secured their systems, word spread quickly, and soon I was working 16-hour days just to keep up with demand. The growth wasn't without sacrifice. My marriage to Stephanie's mother, Carol, didn't survive my obsession with the business. She left when Stephanie was just 8 years old, claiming she couldn't compete with a company for my attention. It was a fair criticism. I missed dance recitals, parent-teacher conferences, and even Stephanie's high school graduation because of urgent client emergencies. I always promised to make it up to her, but those promises rarely materialized into actual time together. Despite the personal cost, Digital Fortress thrived. By the time Stephanie was in college, we had offices in 3 states and contracts with federal agencies. I paid for her education in full, sent her to study abroad in Europe, and bought her first house as a graduation present. Money was my way of showing love when time was too precious to give. Stephanie studied psychology and eventually became a therapist specializing in family trauma. The irony wasn't lost on me. Perhaps helping others heal from what she experienced was her way of processing our fractured relationship. We maintained cordial interactions, holiday visits, and occasional dinners, but there was always a distance between us that money couldn't bridge. 3 years ago, Stephanie met Paul Thompson at a charity gala I had sponsored but couldn't attend. He worked in financial services, had an MBA from Wharton, and came from a respectable Connecticut family. On paper, he was perfect. But when Stephanie brought him to dinner for the first time, something felt off. His smile never reached his eyes, and his questions about my business seemed too specific, too calculated. Still, Stephanie looked happier than I'd seen her in years, so I kept my reservations to myself. They married in a lavish ceremony at the Four Seasons. I paid for everything, of course. Paul's family was old money, according to Stephanie, but apparently old money doesn't pay for new weddings. I gave them $200,000 as a wedding present, which they used as a down payment on a colonial in Brookline that was well above what a therapist and financial advisor should reasonably afford. In the years that followed, I saw them mainly on holidays. Stephanie would call occasionally, usually when they were planning a vacation or renovation. Each time, I would transfer money without question, hoping to buy the closeness I failed to build with time and presence. Then came TechGuard Incorporated with their initial offer of $30 million for Digital Fortress. I was 67 years old, with more money than I could spend and fewer years ahead than behind. It seemed like the right time to sell. Through hard negotiation and a bidding war with another security firm, I increased the final price to $40 million. The papers were signed last week, with the money transfer scheduled for tomorrow morning. Interestingly, as the sale became public knowledge, Stephanie and Paul suddenly had more time for me. Sunday dinners became a regular occurrence. Paul called to discuss investment strategies. Stephanie asked about my retirement plans, health directives, and estate planning. I was touched by their apparent concern and grateful for the chance to rebuild our relationship. What I didn't tell them was that I still monitored the joint account I had set up for Stephanie years ago. 3 weeks ago, I noticed withdrawals totaling $75,000 transferred to an offshore account. When I casually asked if she was planning a surprise vacation, she laughed nervously and changed the subject. The celebration dinner at La Maison was Paul's suggestion. The most exclusive restaurant in town for the most successful man we know, he said with that same hollow smile. Stephanie seemed unusually excited about the reservation, insisting on ordering the wine herself because she wanted everything to be perfect for her amazing father. During the car ride to the restaurant, I noticed Paul's hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. Stephanie's laughter seemed forced as she talked about plans for us to travel together. Something wasn't right, but I pushed my concerns aside, determined to enjoy what should have been one of the proudest moments of my life. As we settled into our corner table with its crisp white tablecloth and gleaming silverware, Paul kept checking his phone under the table. Stephanie's eyes darted nervously around the room, and when my phone rang with a call from my attorney about finalizing tomorrow's transfer, I had no idea that stepping away to answer it would reveal a truth more devastating than anything I could have imagined. La Maison wasn't just expensive, it was exclusive to the point of absurdity. The waiting list for reservations stretched months, and the $600 per person tasting menu changed daily based on the chef's whims. The dining room felt like a theater, with soft lighting illuminating just 12 tables, each positioned for maximum privacy. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over hand-painted silk wallpaper, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. To Dad, Stephanie raised her water glass as we settled in. "The most brilliant businessman I know. May your retirement be as successful as your career." Paul joined in. "And to finally having time to enjoy your hard-earned rewards with the people who matter most." His voice carried an unusual edge that I couldn't quite place. The sommelier approached with the wine list, but Stephanie waved him off. "We've pre-ordered something special," she announced. "A 1982 Krug Brut. Dad, it's to mark the year you founded Digital Fortress." I was genuinely touched. It was a $15,000 bottle of champagne and a thoughtful connection to my company's beginning. The sommelier returned with the bottle, performing the opening ritual with practiced precision. I noticed Stephanie watching intently as he poured my glass first. "You must try it first, Dad," she insisted. "Tell us if it's as exceptional as they claim." As appetizers arrived, delicate sea scallops with truffle foam, Paul steered the conversation toward business. "So the money transfers tomorrow, directly to your personal accounts?" "Most of it," I answered carefully. "Some goes to a charitable trust, and some to various investments my team has identified." Stephanie placed her hand on mine. "You've worked so hard all these years. I hope you've made provisions to protect yourself if anything should happen." "If anything should happen? Health problems, aging issues," she explained quickly. "Have you updated your advance directive? Your power of attorney?" Paul nodded, earnestly. "Essential planning at this stage. Who would make financial decisions if you were incapacitated?" The questions felt oddly specific and increasingly uncomfortable. I glanced down at my untouched champagne, a sudden wariness taking root. "Actually, I'm meeting with my attorney next week about all that," I lied. "Nothing's been decided." Disappointment flickered across Paul's face before he could mask it. Stephanie reached for my champagne glass, nudging it closer to me. "You haven't tried the Krug yet. After everything we did to get this bottle for tonight." My phone rang at that moment, saved by perfect timing. My attorney's name flashed on the screen. "Excuse me," I said, standing. "I need to take this. Final details about tomorrow's transfer." I stepped into a quiet alcove near the restrooms, genuinely grateful for the interruption. As I discussed final verification processes with my attorney, a young waiter approached hesitantly. His name tag read Marco. "Mr. Winters?" he said quietly after I ended my call. "Could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Something in his expression made me follow him to a small staff area without question. He closed the door and turned to me with evident discomfort. "Sir, our security cameras monitor the dining room for quality control," he began. I was reviewing footage when I noticed something concerning. He turned a tablet toward me, showing our table from an overhead angle. The footage clearly showed Stephanie reaching into her purse while Paul created a distraction by dropping his napkin. She removed a small packet and, when she thought no one was looking, emptied white powder into my champagne glass. My world tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of a nearby counter to steady myself. "I recognize the method," Marco continued. "I worked security before this job. It looked like Rohypnol or something similar." The powder dissolved instantly. I struggled to process what I was seeing. My own daughter had just drugged me. But why? The sales proceeds wouldn't transfer until tomorrow, unless they needed my authorization codes or signatures for something tonight. Has this been reported to management? The police? I managed to ask. I came directly to you first, Marco replied. I wasn't sure. I made a split-second decision. Don't report it yet. Let me handle this my way first. Marco seemed uncertain. Sir, if you've been drugged, I haven't drunk any yet, I assured him. And I won't. But I need to understand what they're planning. As I prepared to return to the table, Marco stopped me. Sir, do you want me to call someone? Security, perhaps? Not yet. But stay alert. And thank you. I took a moment to compose myself before returning to our table, my mind racing with possible scenarios. As I approached, I noticed Stephanie checking her phone, then quickly tucking it away. A text notification preview caught my eye. Everything ready for tonight. Just need him to... The rest was cut off, but it confirmed my suspicions. This wasn't a spontaneous act. It was planned, coordinated, and about to unfold. I needed to play along while figuring out exactly what they intended. I sat down with a forced smile. Good news. Everything's set for tomorrow. The full amount will be transferred by noon. That's wonderful, Dad. Stephanie beamed. We should toast. She raised her water glass, deliberately leaving my champagne untouched. To new beginnings. I lifted my champagne glass but didn't bring it to my lips. Instead, I used the toast as cover to switch glasses with Stephanie while pretending to clink them together. To new beginnings, I echoed, watching carefully as Stephanie, unaware of the switch, took a sip from what she thought was her safe glass of champagne. Paul turned the conversation back to my finances. Have you thought about consolidating your accounts after the transfer? It might be easier to manage everything from one place. I'm considering it, I replied noncommittally. My team has several options prepared. As the main course arrived, perfectly seared duck breast with cherry reduction, I noticed Stephanie blinking rapidly, a slight confusion crossing her features. She reached for her water glass and missed by several inches. Are you feeling all right? I asked, knowing full well she wasn't. I'm just a little light-headed suddenly, she mumbled, her words beginning to slur. Must be the champagne. Paul shot her a confused look, then glanced at my clear eyes and steady hands with growing alarm. Maybe you should slow down, honey, he said tensely. You've barely eaten anything. I watched them both carefully as I cut into my duck. The roles had suddenly reversed. I was now the observer in whatever scheme they had planned, and they were the ones scrambling to adjust. When Stephanie's fork clattered loudly onto her plate, Paul's face drained of color. Several nearby diners glanced our way. I think she needs some air, Paul said hastily, moving to help Stephanie up. Her legs buckled as she stood, and she crashed back into her chair. The restaurant manager appeared beside our table. Is everything all right here? My daughter seems unwell, I said calmly. Perhaps too much champagne on an empty stomach. As the manager helped Stephanie to a private lounge area, her purse fell open, spilling its contents. Among the scattered items, I glimpsed a small notebook. I quickly picked it up along with her other belongings, catching a glimpse of its pages as I did so. What I saw made my blood run cold. Detailed notes about my bank accounts, passwords, and a step-by-step plan titled, After A is Incapacitated. I slipped the notebook into my pocket before following the manager and my now barely conscious daughter, leaving Paul to settle the bill. Whatever game they were playing, the rules had just changed dramatically. By the time we reached the private lounge, Stephanie could barely keep her eyes open. The restaurant manager called for paramedics, while I maintained my concerned father facade. Inside, I was cycling through anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. This isn't like her, I told the manager, playing my role perfectly. She's not usually a heavy drinker. Paul rushed in, his face a mask of false concern layered over genuine panic. What happened? She only had one glass of champagne. The paramedics are on their way, the manager informed us. Has she taken any medication today that might interact with alcohol? No, nothing, Paul answered quickly. Too quickly. I watched him closely as he knelt beside Stephanie, whispering something in her ear that I couldn't catch. Her only response was a weak groan. Whatever he had planned for tonight was unraveling rapidly. I should get her home, Paul suggested, attempting to lift her from the couch. She just needs to sleep it off. Absolutely not, I said firmly. She needs medical attention. This isn't normal. Paul's jaw tightened. We wouldn't want to embarrass her. You know how private Stephanie is about these things. Her health is more important than privacy, I countered, noticing how his hand kept moving toward Stephanie's purse. The paramedics will be here any minute. His eyes darted to the exit, then back to me. I should move the car closer to the entrance. The valet can handle that, I said, effectively trapping him in the room. While we waited for the ambulance, my mind raced through recent interactions that suddenly made sense in this new, terrible context. Stephanie asking to be added to my accounts just in case. Paul's pointed questions about my security protocols. Their sudden interest in my health directives and power of attorney. Most damning was the memory of last Sunday's dinner at their house, when I'd momentarily left my phone on their kitchen counter. I'd returned to find it in exactly the same position, but now wondered if they'd used those few minutes to install spyware or copy sensitive information. The paramedics arrived and quickly assessed Stephanie. Her vitals are stable, but she's heavily sedated, the lead EMT reported. We're taking her to Massachusetts General. You can follow us there. As they loaded Stephanie onto a stretcher, her arm dangled lifelessly over the side. Paul made a show of being the concerned husband, but I noticed how he kept checking his phone, sending quick texts when he thought I wasn't looking. I'll ride with her in the ambulance, I announced, leaving Paul no choice but to follow in his car. During the short ambulance ride, I seized the opportunity to speak privately with one of the paramedics. I suspect she may have been drugged, I said quietly. Possibly Rohypnol. The paramedic's expression turned serious. We'll make sure the hospital runs a toxicology screen immediately. At Massachusetts General, Stephanie was wheeled directly to an examination room. Paul arrived minutes later, his composure visibly cracking. He paced the waiting area, making calls he claimed were to family members but taking care to step out of earshot each time. When the emergency room doctor approached us, his expression confirmed my suspicions. Your daughter has Rohypnol in her system, he stated bluntly. A fairly significant dose. We're treating her now, but she'll need to remain overnight for observation. Paul's face went white. That's impossible. How would she get that? I stepped forward. Actually, doctor, I believe the Rohypnol was intended for me. Both the doctor and Paul stared at me in shock. What are you talking about? Paul sputtered. A waiter at La Maison witnessed Stephanie putting something in my champagne, I explained. He showed me security footage. I switched our glasses without anyone noticing. The doctor excused himself to contact hospital security, while Paul's expression cycled through shock, confusion, and finally calculation. That's ridiculous, he attempted. Why would Stephanie do something like that? The waiter must be mistaken. I don't think he was, I replied coldly, pulling Stephanie's notebook from my pocket. Just like I don't think this plan to access my accounts once I was incapacitated is a mistake either. Paul lunged for the notebook, but I stepped back, bumping into a hospital security guard who had arrived silently behind us. Is there a problem here? The guard asked. Before Paul could respond, a woman in a dark pantsuit appeared, holding up a badge. Detective Sandra Wells, Boston PD. I'd like to ask both of you some questions about a reported drugging incident. Paul's eyes darted toward the exit. I need to use the restroom first. Of course. Detective Wells nodded to the security guard. Officer Jenkins will show you the way. Once Paul was escorted out, Detective Wells turned to me. The restaurant manager called us directly after the paramedics left. I understand you have some concerns about what happened tonight. I handed her Stephanie's notebook. My daughter and her husband tried to drug me. I believe they were planning to access my financial accounts after a major business transaction that completes tomorrow. She flipped through the pages, her expression hardening. $40 million is quite a motive. Do you have any idea what they plan to do with you after getting access to your accounts? The question sent a chill through me. I hadn't considered that their plan might extend beyond theft to something much darker. I'd like to search Mr. Thompson before he returns, she said. With your statement and this notebook, I have sufficient cause. When Paul returned with his security escort, Detective Wells was waiting. Mr. Thompson, I need to search your belongings as part of this investigation. This is harassment, Paul protested. My wife is the victim here. Your cooperation will be noted, she replied evenly. The search revealed 3 phones in Paul's possession. One was his regular iPhone that I recognized. The others were prepaid models with numerous texts to unknown numbers about tonight's plan and after we get access. As Detective Wells bagged the phones as evidence, a nurse approached to inform us that Stephanie was beginning to regain consciousness. Only family can see her right now, she said pointedly, excluding Paul. I'm her husband, Paul objected. Detective Wells intervened. Actually, sir, I need you to come with me to answer some questions downtown. As Paul was led away, protesting loudly, I followed the nurse to Stephanie's room. My daughter lay pale against the white hospital sheets, an IV in her arm and monitors tracking her vital signs. Her eyes fluttered open as I approached. Dad, she mumbled, confusion clouding her features. What happened? Where am I? I sat beside her bed, my heart heavy with questions I never thought I'd have to ask my only child. You're in the hospital, Stephanie. You drank champagne meant for me. Champagne you drugged with Rohypnol. Her eyes widened, then filled with tears as the reality of her situation dawned on her. Whether those tears were from regret, fear of consequences, or simply the drug still in her system, I couldn't tell. But as the monitors beeped steadily in the background, I prepared myself for truths that would forever change our already fragile relationship. The hospital room felt unnaturally quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of Stephanie's heart monitor. Outside, I could hear the bustling sounds of the emergency department. But in here, time seemed suspended as I waited for my daughter to fully regain consciousness. I didn't, Stephanie mumbled, her words still slurred. It wasn't supposed to. Wasn't supposed to what? I pressed gently. Wasn't supposed to be you drinking it? Or wasn't supposed to end up in the hospital? Her eyes remained unfocused, the effects of the Rohypnol still strong in her system. The doctor had explained it would take hours for her to fully metabolize the drug, especially given the substantial dose she'd inadvertently consumed. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. Detective Sandra Wells entered, her expression professional but sympathetic. Mr. Winters, could I speak with you outside? In the hallway, Detective Wells updated me on the situation. We've detained Mr. Thompson for questioning. The restaurant provided us with security footage confirming your account of events. They're being extremely cooperative given the seriousness of the situation. Have you learned anything from Paul yet? I asked. Not directly, but his behavior is telling. He attempted to dispose of one of the phones in a hospital trash can before we took him downtown. Our tech team is working on accessing the devices now. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. Mr. Winters, we found something concerning in your son-in-law's vehicle. A power of attorney document with your electronic signature dated today, along with transfer authorizations for several of your accounts. My stomach dropped. Those signatures are forgeries. I signed no such documents. We suspected as much. She nodded. We're bringing in a financial crime specialist from the FBI. Given the amount of money involved and the evidence of premeditation, this case falls under their jurisdiction as well. As we spoke, a commotion erupted down the hall. Hospital security was restraining a man trying to enter the secure area of the emergency department. Let me go. I need to speak with my wife. Paul's voice carried clearly to where we stood. I thought he was in custody, I said to Detective Wells. He made bail quickly. She frowned. Someone posted a $100,000 cash bond within an hour of his arrest. We watched as security escorted Paul toward the exit. His eyes met mine briefly, filled with cold calculation rather than the concern of a loving husband. I've requested additional officers, Detective Wells assured me. They'll be stationed outside your daughter's room, and we'll have someone escort you home when you're ready. I'm not leaving her, I said firmly. Detective Wells nodded understanding. In that case, I'd like to station an officer inside the room as well. Until we understand the full scope of what we're dealing with, it's best to take every precaution. When I returned to Stephanie's room, she appeared more lucid. The nurse had elevated her bed, and some color had returned to her cheeks. Dad, she whispered as I approached. I'm so sorry. Why, Stephanie? The question emerged more broken than I intended. Was it the money? Were things that desperate? She shook her head weakly, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand. Paul said it was just to get control of some accounts temporarily. He promised no one would get hurt. Your husband just tried to post bail and force his way in here, I told her. Does that sound like someone who doesn't intend harm? Fear flashed across her features. He's here? Now? Security removed him. There's an officer outside your door. Detective Wells entered with another man in a crisp, dark suit. Miss Thompson, I'm Detective Wells, and this is Agent Thomas Burke from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. We need to ask you some questions if you're feeling up to it. Stephanie's gaze darted between them and me. Am I under arrest? Not at this moment, Agent Burke replied. But your cooperation now will significantly impact how this situation develops for you legally. I moved to leave them privacy, but Stephanie grabbed my hand. Stay, Dad, please. I want you to hear everything. Over the next hour, Stephanie's story unfolded in halting, tearful segments. 6 months ago, Paul had come home panicked, confessing he'd made some bad investments that had left them nearly bankrupt. What he called investments were actually gambling debts to a man named Victor Harmon, who had connections to organized crime in Boston. At first, we just needed $75,000, Stephanie explained. Paul said we could borrow it from the joint account Dad set up for me, and we'd pay it back before anyone noticed. But the debt only grew. Victor demanded more money, threatening Paul with violence. When news of my company's sale became public, Paul saw it as their salvation. He said we just needed power of attorney for a few days, Stephanie continued. Just long enough to move some money to pay off Victor, then everything would go back to normal. Dad would never even know. And you believe that? I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. Not really, she admitted, looking away. But Paul changed when we couldn't pay. He became someone else. He said if I didn't help, Victor would kill him, and then come for me. Agent Burke interrupted. Miss Thompson, are you saying you acted under duress? At first, yes. But then, she trailed off, shame evident in her expression. But then what? I prompted. Then I convinced myself it was justified. That you owed me this, after all the years you chose your company over me. Her voice hardened momentarily before crumbling again. I was so wrong. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. Agent Burke exchanged glances with Detective Wells. We're going to need details about Victor Harmon and any other associates involved. As they continued questioning Stephanie, a nurse entered with a tablet. Excuse me, but the toxicology report is complete. Doctor wanted you to see this right away. Detective Wells reviewed the results, her expression grim. The Rohypnol was mixed with another substance, something that would have caused respiratory depression if combined with the heart medication Mr. Winters takes. All eyes turned to me. I take a beta blocker for mild hypertension, I explained, the implication hitting me like a physical blow. Are you saying this combination could have been fatal? The nurse confirmed quietly. Stephanie's face went ashen. No, that's not possible. Paul said it would just make you sleep for a while. Enough time to get the signatures we needed. Did you know about your father's medication? Agent Burke asked sharply. Yes, but I never told Paul about it, she whispered. He must have found out another way. Agent Burke stepped out to make a call while Detective Wells continued her questioning. When he returned, his expression was grim. Miss Thompson, we've just executed a search warrant on your home. Our agents found detailed medical information about your father, including his prescription history. They also discovered multiple recordings of his voice, likely for creating synthesized audio authorizations. Stephanie looked genuinely shocked. I didn't know about any of that. There's more, Agent Burke continued. We found evidence of offshore accounts set up in the Cayman Islands, ready to receive large transfers, along with passport documentation that doesn't match either your or your husband's legal identities. What do you mean? I asked. It appears Mr. Thompson has been living under a partially fabricated identity. His real name is Paul Whitaker, and he has a wife and child in Philadelphia. The revelation struck like a physical blow. Stephanie began hyperventilating, her monitors beeping an alarm as her heart rate spiked. A nurse rushed in to attend to her. I think that's enough for now, Detective Wells said, motioning us toward the door. In the hallway, Agent Burke pulled me aside. Mr. Winters, based on the evidence, This goes well beyond a simple attempt to access your accounts. This was an elaborate scheme that likely would have ended with your death, disguised as an accidental overdose or adverse drug reaction. The clinical way he described what would have been my murder made it somehow more horrifying. What happens now? I asked, feeling suddenly exhausted. We need your daughter's cooperation to build a case against Paul and Victor Harmon. The question is whether you want to press charges against Stephanie as well. I looked through the window at my daughter, sedated once again and restrained to prevent her from harming herself in her agitated state. Despite everything, she was still my child, the only family I had left. Let me think about it, I said finally. But my priority right now is making sure she's safe. If this Victor Harmon is as dangerous as she claims. We're already working on protective measures, Agent Burke assured me. But there's something else you should know. Based on the documents we've recovered, we believe Paul may have been recording your conversations to edit and create fake voice authorizations for financial institutions. The realization that my own voice could have been weaponized against me sent a chill down my spine. Everything I thought I knew about my life had been upended in a single evening, all because a waiter named Marco had been paying attention at exactly the right moment. As I watched over Stephanie's troubled sleep, I couldn't help wondering what would have happened if I'd taken that sip of champagne. Would I already be dead? Would Paul and his associates be emptying my accounts even now, leaving nothing but questions and a convenient medical explanation for my sudden passing? The thought was unbearable, but not as unbearable as the knowledge that my own daughter, however coerced, had been complicit in the plot. As morning light began to filter through the hospital window, I realized that the $40 million that should have represented my life's achievement had nearly cost me that life instead. Morning brought no clarity or peace. I dozed fitfully in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside Stephanie's bed, waking frequently to the sounds of medical staff checking vitals or adjusting equipment. By 8 o'clock, Agent Burke returned with fresh coffee and a grim expression. We've uncovered more about Victor Harmon, he said, handing me a steaming cup. He's not just a loan shark. FBI has had him under surveillance for months in connection with a money laundering operation. Your son-in-law appears to be one of his financial facilitators. Financial facilitators? I repeated. People who help clean illegal money through legitimate channels. Paul's position in financial services gave him access to certain banking systems, but he needed larger sums to move through personal accounts that wouldn't trigger immediate regulatory flags. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity, and my $40 million would provide the perfect cover. Exactly. Burke nodded. A legitimate business sale creating a large personal cash flow that wouldn't raise immediate suspicions if portions were moved offshore. A soft moan from the bed interrupted us. Stephanie was waking up, her eyes fluttering open with visible effort. "Dad," she croaked, her throat dry from the medication. "You're still here." "Of course I am," I replied, helping her sip water through a straw. Agent Burke stepped closer to the bed. "Miss Thompson, how are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," she mumbled. "Is Paul?" "He was released on bail last night, but picked up again this morning after we found evidence at your home," Burke explained. "He's being held without bail now, as a flight risk." Relief flooded her features, followed quickly by shame. "I didn't know who he really was," she whispered. "I swear I didn't know about Philadelphia or his real identity." "We believe you," I assured her, though part of me still struggled with trust. Burke pulled a chair closer. "Miss Thompson, we need your help. Victor Harmon is still out there, and we have reason to believe he'll try to salvage what he can of this operation." "How could I possibly help?" Stephanie asked. "We need someone Harmon trusts, or at least knows is connected to the money. Someone who can help us gather evidence directly against him." I immediately understood what he was suggesting. "No, absolutely not. You're not using my daughter as bait." "Dad," Stephanie began. "It's too dangerous," I insisted. "This man threatened to kill both of you." Agent Burke held up his hands placatingly. "We would take every precaution. Miss Thompson would be under constant surveillance and protection." "And what does Stephanie get out of this arrangement?" I demanded. "Cooperation would be taken into consideration regarding any potential charges against her," Burke answered diplomatically. Stephanie reached for my hand. "Dad, I need to do this. Not just for legal reasons, but for us. I helped create this mess. Let me help fix it." Before I could respond, Detective Wells entered the room with another officer. "We have a problem. Paul Thompson escaped custody during transport to the Federal Detention Center." "How is that possible?" Burke demanded. "The transport vehicle was ambushed. 2 officers injured, not fatally. Witnesses reported 3 men in balaclavas, using what appeared to be military-grade weapons." My blood ran cold. "Harmon?" "Most likely," Wells confirmed. "We're moving Miss Thompson to a secure location immediately." "I'm coming with her," I stated, leaving no room for argument. "That's not advisable, Mr. Winters," Burke cautioned. "You're also a potential target. Then protect us both." "But I'm not leaving her side," I insisted. While medical staff prepared Stephanie for transport, I stepped into the hallway with Burke and Wells to discuss logistics. "There's something else you should know," Burke said quietly. "The lab analyzed Paul's phones. He's been sharing recordings of your conversations for weeks, specifically discussions about your banking procedures and security protocols. He was always asking questions about my business," I recalled. "I thought he was just making conversation or showing interest." "He was gathering intelligence," Wells explained. "Building a profile of your financial footprint." Burke nodded grimly. "We found evidence he was working with a voice synthesis expert. They likely have enough samples to create convincing audio of you authorizing transactions or changing security parameters." The violation felt profound. Every conversation, every moment I thought I was connecting with my son-in-law, had been weaponized against me. "Can they still access my accounts?" I asked. "Possibly," Burke admitted. "We flagged your accounts with the relevant financial institutions, but sophisticated voice authentication systems can be vulnerable to well-crafted synthetic audio. Then we need to move the money," I decided. "Change all security protocols immediately." Burke looked hesitant. "That could alert Harmon that we're onto the broader operation. We want him to think he still has a chance at that money." "You want to use my $40 million as bait too?" I asked incredulously. "Not exactly," Burke clarified. "We want to create the illusion that the money is still accessible. Our financial crimes team can create a convincing digital mirage, while your actual funds are secured elsewhere." It was a risky strategy, but I understood the logic. As a cybersecurity expert myself, I'd often created honeypot systems to lure and trap hackers. Within an hour, Stephanie was discharged into federal protective custody. We were transported via an unmarked medical van to a secure FBI safe house in a suburban neighborhood outside Boston. The modest colonial house looked like any other on the street, but I noticed the reinforced doors and windows and the discreet surveillance cameras monitoring the perimeter. Inside, Agent Burke introduced us to our protection team, 3 agents who would rotate shifts ensuring our safety. The house was stocked with basic necessities, secure communication equipment, and medical supplies for Stephanie's continued recovery. "The property is under 24-hour surveillance," Burke explained. "No one approaches without us knowing about it." Once settled, we participated in a video conference with the FBI's operation team. They had developed a strategy to draw out Harmon and his associates, including Paul. "Miss Thompson," the operation leader addressed Stephanie, "we need you to make controlled contact with your husband." "How?" she asked, her voice steadier than I expected. "A phone call expressing confusion about your situation. You'll say you've been released from the hospital but don't know where your father is. You're scared and need Paul's help." Stephanie nodded slowly. "He'll suspect it's a trap." "Possibly," the agent acknowledged. "But his options are limited. The money transfer is scheduled for tomorrow morning. This is his last chance to gain access." "And if he arranges to meet?" I asked. "Miss Thompson will be wearing state-of-the-art surveillance equipment. We'll have agents positioned to intervene immediately if there's any danger." The plan was set in motion. Stephanie would make the call in the evening, giving Paul and Harmon minimal time to plan anything elaborate before the scheduled money transfer the following day. As we waited for evening to arrive, Stephanie and I found ourselves alone in the safe house's small living room. The tension between us was palpable. "Why didn't you come to me?" I finally asked. "If you were in trouble, financial or otherwise, why try to steal instead of just asking for help?" Stephanie stared at her hands. "It wasn't just about the money at first. Paul made me believe you owed us, that after years of choosing your business over family, this was just balancing the scales. The words stung because they contained a kernel of truth. I had prioritized digital fortress over family connections for decades, and then it spiraled, she continued. By the time I realized how dangerous Paul and his associates were, I was already implicated. I was too ashamed to admit what I'd done, and too scared of what they might do if I backed out. So you chose to drug me instead, I said, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. I didn't know it could kill you, she whispered. I swear I didn't know about the interaction with your heart medication. Paul said it would just make you sleepy and compliant. I wanted to believe her. Despite everything, I desperately wanted to believe my daughter hadn't knowingly tried to murder me. When did our relationship become so broken? I asked softly. It was never whole to begin with, Dad, she replied with brutal honesty. You built firewalls around your heart the same way you built them for your clients' data. Impenetrable. The analogy hit home. I had approached relationships with the same clinical efficiency I approached security protocols, identifying vulnerabilities as weaknesses to be eliminated, rather than connections to be strengthened. Our conversation was interrupted by Agent Burke's return. It's time, he announced, carrying equipment for Stephanie's call to Paul. As technicians fitted Stephanie with a nearly invisible earpiece and microphone, I watched with growing apprehension. Despite the promises of protection, I was sending my daughter into the lion's den. The same daughter who, hours earlier, I had discovered was willing to drug me for financial gain. Yet as I observed her composed determination and genuine remorse, I recognized something in her I had missed before. Strength that mirrored my own, but directed toward redemption rather than ambition. When everything was ready, Stephanie took a deep breath and dialed Paul's number. After 3 rings, he answered. Stephanie, where are you? His voice sounded genuinely concerned, a masterful performance. Paul, I'm scared, she replied, her voice deliberately shaky. The hospital released me, but I don't know where my dad is. There were police everywhere asking questions about you. Are you somewhere safe? Is anyone with you? I am at a motel near the hospital. I used cash like you always said to in an emergency. I don't know what to do. There was a pause, the sound of muffled conversation in the background. Stay there, Paul finally said. I'll send someone to get you. Don't trust anyone else, not even your father if he contacts you. He's trying to frame us both for his tax evasion scheme. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. Stephanie maintained her frightened facade perfectly. What motel? Paul pressed. The Lakeside Inn on Route 9, she replied with the predetermined location. Room number 123. Be ready in 30 minutes. Pack nothing. We need to leave the state tonight. The call ended, and Stephanie looked up at the agents surrounding her. He bought it. Agent Burke was already mobilizing his team. We'll have the room secured and under surveillance within 15 minutes. Miss Thompson, you'll be there with a female agent posing as a friend. Your father will remain here under protection. No, I interrupted. Whoever Paul sends will be looking for Stephanie alone. A second person will make them suspicious. It's too dangerous for her to be physically present, Burke argued. Then I'll go instead, I offered. The room fell silent. That's actually not a bad idea, the operation leader said slowly. Harmon wants Winters, not his daughter, if they believe they've found him vulnerable and alone. Absolutely not, Stephanie protested. Dad, they want to kill you. They won't get the chance, I assured her. And this way, you stay completely safe. After heated debate, a compromise was reached. I would be in the motel room, visible through the window to convince Paul's people they'd found me. But Stephanie would be in an adjacent room with agents, communicating with Paul as if she were alone, directing him to my location. As we finalized preparations, Agent Burke pulled me aside. Mr. Winters, there's something you should know before we proceed. Based on the evidence we've gathered, we believe Paul intended to eliminate both you and eventually your daughter once the money was secured. The revelation was both shocking and somehow unsurprising. How do you know? Voice recordings on his secondary phone. Conversations with someone we believe is Harmon discussing removing all liabilities once the transfers were complete. I felt a surge of protective rage. Tell me what I need to do to end this. As our team deployed to the motel, setting an elaborate trap for the predators who had targeted my family, I found myself more focused and determined than I had been in years. The skills that had built my cybersecurity empire, careful planning, strategic thinking, and anticipating my adversaries' moves, were now being deployed for something infinitely more valuable than money: justice and my daughter's safety. The Lakeside Inn lived up to its name only in the technical sense. It sat beside a small, murky retention pond rather than any natural body of water. Its faded brick exterior and flickering neon sign made it the perfect setting for our operation. Anonymous, transient, and unlikely to attract attention from ordinary citizens who might get caught in potential crossfire. Room 123 was on the ground floor, with a direct view of the parking lot, allowing FBI surveillance teams positioned in vans and adjacent rooms to monitor all approaches. Inside, the room had been transformed into a tactical command center disguised as an ordinary motel accommodation. "These cameras are motion-activated," explained Agent Renee Collins, adjusting a tiny lens hidden in the smoke detector. "We have complete coverage of the room, bathroom, and entry points. The lamps, clock radio, and television all contain additional surveillance equipment." I sat on the edge of the bed, taking it all in. "And Stephanie is where exactly?" "Room 125, connected by an internal door that appears to be standard connecting rooms from the outside. She's with Agents Morgan and Diaz." Burke entered from the adjoining room, carrying a bulletproof vest. "You'll need to wear this under your shirt." "Won't they check for something like that?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Possibly," Burke admitted, "but it's non-negotiable for your participation." I put on the vest, noting how it bulked slightly under my dress shirt. "What's the actual plan here?" "I can't imagine Paul or his people will just wander in for a polite conversation about attempted murder and fraud. Based on the communication patterns we've observed, we believe Paul will send someone to retrieve Stephanie first. Once they confirm her location, Paul and possibly Harmon will approach to deal with you directly. And by deal with, you mean kill me and take control of my accounts before tomorrow's transfer." Burke didn't bother sugarcoating it. "Essentially, yes. They need your authorization codes or, failing that, to create circumstances where they can use the voice samples they've collected without raising immediate alarms." "A dead man can't report fraud," I noted grimly. "Precisely. Which is why you won't actually be alone. We'll have agents positioned to intervene at the first sign of danger." I adjusted the earpiece they'd provided, testing its functionality. "And Stephanie's role is to maintain communication with Paul, making him believe she's here and vulnerable?" "Yes. She'll text updates as directed while remaining safely in the adjacent room. Under no circumstances is she to enter this room once the operation begins." The finality in his voice made it clear this was another non-negotiable condition. At 7:30, we received word that surveillance had spotted a black SUV circling the motel. By 7:45, it had parked 2 buildings away, and a man in a maintenance uniform approached room 123, carrying a toolbox. "Housekeeping," came the gruff voice, accompanied by a sharp knock. "I didn't request maintenance," I called out, following the script. "Management sent me. Issue with the shower reported in this unit." I moved to the predetermined position by the window, visible to anyone looking in but partially obscured by curtains. "Can it wait until morning?" "Won't take but a minute, sir." Following protocol, I cracked the door with the security chain still engaged. The man outside was broad-shouldered, with a forgettable face and dead eyes. "Like I said, I didn't request maintenance," I repeated firmly. He nodded almost imperceptibly, then turned away. Through my earpiece, I heard Burke's update. "He's confirmed visual. Subject returning to vehicle." Minutes later, Stephanie's burner phone chimed with a text from Paul. "Which room is your father in?" Following her instructions, she replied, "2 doors down, in 123. I saw him check in an hour ago. He looks drunk." The response came quickly. "Stay put. Don't contact him." At 8:15, a second vehicle arrived. A taxi that didn't match any local company's markings. 2 men emerged, one instantly recognizable as Paul despite his attempted disguise with a baseball cap and sunglasses. The other was older, with silver hair and an expensive-looking overcoat that seemed out of place at the modest motel. "That's Harmon," Burke's voice confirmed in my ear. Both primary targets approaching. Everyone in position. I moved away from the window, sitting on the edge of the bed, as instructed. The plan was to appear vulnerable, possibly intoxicated, an easy target for whatever they had planned. The knock, when it came, was friendly and familiar. "Room service." I didn't order anything. I called back, playing my role. "Complimentary for valued guests," came Paul's voice, eerily cheerful. "Management's appreciation for your business." I approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole to confirm it was indeed Paul, standing there with a covered room service tray. Behind him stood Harmon, partially obscured but unmistakably watching the surroundings with predatory attention. "Just leave it outside," I suggested. "I'm afraid I need a signature," Paul insisted. I opened the door with deliberate reluctance, maintaining the chain. "Paul, what are you doing here?" The surprise in my voice wasn't entirely feigned. Despite knowing he would appear, seeing my son-in-law standing there with his familiar smile, knowing what he had planned, was profoundly disturbing. "Alvin, what a coincidence." Paul's performance was seamless. "I was just helping out a friend who works here. May I come in? I've been trying to reach you all day." "This isn't a good time," I mumbled, playing up the appearance of intoxication. "It'll just take a minute. I have some important papers about tomorrow's transfer that need your signature." Of course he did. I hesitated, then reluctantly unhooked the chain. Paul entered smoothly, followed immediately by Harmon, who closed the door behind them. "This is my associate, Mr. Harmon," Paul introduced casually. "He's helping with some of the offshore investment structures we discussed." "I don't recall discussing offshore investments," I replied, allowing a hint of suspicion to color my voice. Harmon smiled, thinly. "Memory issues are common at your age, especially when mixed with alcohol." I noticed Paul scanning the room carefully, eyes lingering on the connecting door to Stephanie's room. "You seem nervous, Paul," I observed. "Something wrong?" "Not at all," he replied, setting down the covered tray. "Just concerned about you. Stephanie mentioned you were acting strangely earlier." "Where is my daughter?" I demanded, adding a slight slur to my words. "Safe," Harmon interjected, "which is more than I can say for you at the moment, Mr. Winters." The pretense evaporated instantly. Harmon pulled a gun from beneath his coat, while Paul produced a syringe from his pocket. "Let's keep this simple," Harmon continued conversationally. "We need access to your accounts before tomorrow morning's transfer. You can provide that voluntarily, or we can take a less pleasant approach." "You mean like drugging me, again?" I asked pointedly. Paul had the decency to look momentarily uncomfortable. That was unfortunate. Stephanie was never supposed to drink that champagne. No, I was. And the interaction with my heart medication would have killed me, wouldn't it? "A regrettable miscalculation," Harmon shrugged. "But here we are with a second chance to do things properly." In my earpiece, Burke's voice remained calm. "Keep them talking. Team in position." I gestured toward the syringe in Paul's hand. "What's that supposed to be?" "Just something to make you cooperative," Paul explained. "You'll authorize the necessary transfers, then take a nice long sleep. By the time you wake up, if you wake up, the money will be long gone." "And Stephanie? What happens to her in this scenario?" A shadow crossed Paul's face. "She's served her purpose. She's your wife," I reminded him, genuine anger breaking through my performance. "One of them," Harmon smirked. "Paul has quite the complicated domestic situation." Paul shot him an irritated glance. "This isn't productive. Let's get what we came for." Harmon gestured with his gun. "Sit at the desk. We have documents ready for your signature and a script for you to read for voice authorization on several accounts." I complied slowly, playing for time. "You realize my accounts have multi-layer security. Signatures and voice authorization won't be enough." "We have that covered," Paul assured me, placing a laptop on the desk. "Your email accounts, password manager, and authentication apps have been compromised for weeks. We just need the human element now." The violation was staggering. They hadn't just plotted to drug and potentially kill me. They'd been systematically dismantling my digital security for months. As Paul set up the computer, I noticed Stephanie's text alert sounding from his pocket. He checked it quickly, frowning. "Problem?" Harmon asked sharply. "Stephanie says she thinks she saw police outside," Paul reported. Harmon's eyes narrowed. "Check it out. This feels wrong." Paul moved to the window, cautiously peering through the curtains. In that moment of distraction, I activated the panic button hidden in my watch, the signal for immediate intervention. What happened next unfolded with controlled chaos. The connecting door burst open as agents rushed in from Stephanie's room. Simultaneously, the main door was breached by another tactical team. "FBI, drop your weapons." The command echoed from multiple directions. Harmon reacted instantly, grabbing me and pressing his gun to my head. "Back off or he dies right now." Paul lunged for the bathroom, only to find agents emerging from there as well. Cornered, he raised his hands in surrender. Harmon, however, wasn't giving up so easily. "I'll kill him. I swear I will." "You do that," I told him calmly, "and you lose any bargaining power you have. Dead, I'm no use to you." "Shut up," he hissed, dragging me backward toward the window. I felt the gun barrel press harder against my temple, but I also felt something else. Harmon's increasing desperation. Men like him didn't plan for failure. "Victor Harmon," Agent Burke's voice cut through the tension. "We have the room surrounded. There's no escape route here." "There's always an escape route," Harmon countered, his breath hot against my ear. "And Winters here is my ticket." What Harmon didn't realize was that I'd spent decades identifying vulnerabilities in seemingly impenetrable systems. In this case, his vulnerability was predictable: arrogance and underestimation. I let my body go suddenly limp, dropping my full weight downward. The unexpected move caught Harmon off guard, his grip loosening just enough for me to twist away. The gun discharged, the bullet embedding in the ceiling as I rolled clear. FBI agents swarmed forward, subduing Harmon with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, both he and Paul were restrained and being read their rights. As the immediate danger passed, Stephanie rushed in despite strict instructions to remain in the other room. "Dad, are you okay?" I held her tightly, the reality of how close we'd come to tragedy hitting me full force. "I'm fine. It's over now." Agent Burke approached, holstering his weapon. "Mr. Winters, your cooperation was instrumental in apprehending these men. Their network extends further than we initially thought." "What happens now?" I asked. "We've already frozen the offshore accounts they set up. Forensic accountants are tracing all financial connections. With the evidence gathered tonight, plus Miss Thompson's testimony, both men are facing serious federal charges." I glanced at Paul, now handcuffed and being escorted out. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw nothing of the man I thought I had known, only a hollow opportunist who had nearly destroyed my family for money. As the agents processed the scene, Stephanie remained by my side, her hand clutching mine like a lifeline. "I never thought it would go this far," she whispered. "I was so stupid." "We both made mistakes," I acknowledged. "I gave you money instead of time and attention. You resented me enough to be vulnerable to someone like Paul. That doesn't excuse what I did." "No, it doesn't," I agreed. "But understanding how we got here is the first step toward making sure it never happens again." As we watched the authorities dismantle the operation that had nearly cost us everything, I felt an unexpected sense of gratitude beneath the lingering fear and anger, not for the narrow escape from death, but for the opportunity it presented, a chance to rebuild what had been broken long before Paul entered our lives. The money that had almost gotten me killed suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the relationship that might yet be saved. And as we left the Lakeside Inn under FBI escort, I realized that my greatest security vulnerability had never been in my digital systems, but in the emotional firewalls I'd built around myself for decades. 1 year later, I stood at the entrance of Le Maison restaurant, this time with a very different purpose than celebration. The restaurant had undergone renovations, but the elegant atmosphere remained unchanged. As I approached the maitre d', a familiar face emerged from the staff area. "Mr. Winters," Marco greeted me warmly. "Right on time. Head waiter now." I noted the promotion reflected in his uniform. He smiled modestly. "Thanks in large part to your recommendation letter. Your table is ready whenever you are." I followed him to the same corner table where, A year earlier, my life had nearly ended. Today, instead of champagne and betrayal, the table was set for a business lunch. Your guest called to say she's running about 10 minutes late, Marco informed me. Can I bring you anything while you wait? Just water, thank you. As Marco departed, I took a moment to reflect on the tumultuous year that had passed. The FBI operation at the Lakeside Inn had been just the beginning. The investigation eventually uncovered a sophisticated network of financial crimes spanning 3 states, with Victor Harmon at the center and Paul as one of his key facilitators. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Paul had been living dual lives with families in both Massachusetts and Pennsylvania, using different variations of his identity in each location. His Philadelphia wife had no knowledge of Stephanie, just as Stephanie had no knowledge of her. Both women had been manipulated and used as pawns in his schemes. Harmon's operation had targeted other wealthy business owners before me, though none with quite the payday my $40 million sale represented. In each case, the pattern was similar. Identify vulnerable family members, exploit them to gain access to the target's finances, then eliminate all witnesses once the money was secured. The trial had been mercifully quick. Both Paul and Harmon accepted plea deals rather than face the mountain of evidence against them. Paul received 25 years for conspiracy, attempted murder, fraud, and a host of financial crimes. Harmon, with his longer criminal history and role as the organization's leader, received life without parole. Stephanie had been granted immunity in exchange for her testimony, though the psychological consequences of her actions proved punishment enough. She spent 3 months in an intensive therapy program, confronting not only the trauma of Paul's betrayal, but her own complicity and the unresolved issues with me that had made her vulnerable to manipulation. As for the $40 million that started it all, it eventually transferred safely. I kept enough to ensure a comfortable retirement, but the experience had fundamentally changed my relationship with money. Wealth, that had once represented success and security, now carried the taint of how easily it had corrupted those around me. My thoughts were interrupted by the restaurant's door opening. Stephanie entered, looking professional in a tailored blazer and simple dress, her therapist persona giving way to something more authentic and grounded over the past months. She spotted me and approached with a tentative smile. "Sorry I'm late," she said, taking the seat across from me. "The foundation meeting ran long. No problem." "How did it go?" Her face brightened. "Really well. The board approved funding for the new education initiative. We'll be able to reach twice as many people with financial literacy programs this year." The foundation had been my first major decision after the dust settled. I donated $15 million to establish the Winters Family Foundation for Financial Security, dedicated to helping victims of financial crimes rebuild their lives and educating vulnerable populations about predatory practices and scams. Stephanie, seeking both redemption and purpose, had gradually taken on increasing responsibility within the foundation. Her background in psychology proved unexpectedly valuable in developing programs for those traumatized by financial exploitation. "That's excellent news," I replied, genuinely proud of what she'd accomplished. "The prevention programs were always closest to your heart." "They still are," she acknowledged. "Every time we help someone recognize the warning signs before they're victimized, it feels like making amends in some small way." Marco returned to take our orders, his demeanor professional but warm. After he left, I noticed Stephanie watching him with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about how different things would be if he hadn't seen me that night?" she asked quietly. If he hadn't said anything? The question had haunted both of us over the past year. A single moment of observation and moral courage from a stranger had altered the trajectory of our lives. "I think about it often," I admitted. "That's why I've funded his culinary school tuition. Some debts can never be fully repaid." We settled into comfortable conversation about the foundation's work, deliberately avoiding the heavier topics that had dominated so many of our interactions during the past year. There would always be a scar where betrayal had wounded our relationship, but we had both worked hard to build something new and authentic from the wreckage. After lunch, we walked together toward the financial district, where the foundation's offices occupied the 10th floor of a modest building. The irony wasn't lost on me that I now spent more time on foundation business than I ever had at family gatherings during my working years. "Dad," Stephanie said as we waited for the elevator, "there's something I've been wanting to tell you." Her serious tone immediately put me on alert, old anxieties briefly resurfacing. "I've been offered a position leading a national financial abuse prevention program," she continued. "It would mean relocating to Chicago for at least a year." "That's quite an opportunity," I managed, fighting the immediate sense of loss. "When would you start?" "That's just it. I turned it down this morning." I stopped, genuinely surprised. "But why? It sounds perfect for your experience and interests." The elevator arrived, but neither of us moved to enter it. "Because some things are more important than career advancement," she said simply. "We've only just started rebuilding our relationship. I'm not willing to put physical distance between us now." The sincerity in her voice made my throat tight with emotion. "Stephanie, I spent decades prioritizing work over family. I won't let you make the same mistake." "It's my choice, Dad. At least take some time to reconsider," I insisted. "We can make long-distance work if it's an opportunity you really want." She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "I'll think about it, but only if you promise to visit every month if I take it." "Deal," I agreed immediately. As we finally entered the elevator, I reflected on how profoundly my priorities had shifted. A year ago, my identity had been wholly defined by business success and financial achievement. I had measured my worth by the number in my bank account and the value of my company. Now, watching my daughter press the button for the 10th floor, I understood wealth in an entirely different way. True security had nothing to do with money and everything to do with authentic connection. The relationships we build, the trust we earn, and the integrity we maintain. These are the real assets that can't be stolen by even the most sophisticated schemes. When we reached the foundation offices, Stephanie was immediately swept into a meeting with community partners. I watched from the doorway as she confidently led the discussion, her natural empathy and hard-won wisdom evident in every interaction. Marco had saved my life with his observation and courage, but Stephanie, in her journey from betrayal to redemption, had taught me how to truly live it. Later that afternoon, I gave a presentation to a group of business owners about protecting themselves from similar schemes. As I shared the warning signs I had missed and the lessons I had learned at such great cost, I concluded with the most important insight of all. The greatest threat to your security isn't sophisticated hacking or complex fraud, I told them. It's the walls we build that prevent authentic connection with the people around us. I spent decades creating impenetrable security systems for data while leaving my most important relationship vulnerable through neglect and distance. Don't make the same mistake I did. The wealth that matters most isn't in your accounts. It's sitting across the dinner table from you every night. As applause filled the room, I caught Stephanie's eye from the back row. Her proud smile reflected not just approval of my message, but acknowledgement of how far we had both come. From the depths of betrayal and the edge of tragedy, we had forged something neither of us had truly experienced before. A relationship built on honesty, forgiveness, and genuine presence. My $40 million business sale had nearly cost me everything. But in the end, it led me to discover what I had been missing all along. The priceless wealth of authentic family connection that no amount of money could ever buy. Have you ever had a moment when something unexpected completely changed your perspective on what truly matters in life? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need this reminder about what real wealth looks like. Thank you for listening, and I wish you all relationships built on trust and authenticity rather than convenience and transaction.